Psalm 64. Hear my voice, O God, in my complaint. Preserve my life from dread of the enemy. Hide me from the secret plots of the wicked, from the throng of evildoers who whet their tongues like swords, who aim bitter words like arrows, shooting from ambush at the blameless, shooting at him suddenly and without fear. They hold fast their evil purpose. They talk of laying snares secretly, thinking, who can see them? They search out injustice, saying, we have accomplished a diligent search. For the inward mind of a heart and man are deep. But God shoots his arrows at them. They are wounded suddenly. They are brought to ruin with their own tongues turned against them. All who see them will wag their heads. Then all mankind fears. They tell what God has brought about and ponder what he has done. Let the righteous one rejoice in the Lord and take refuge in him. Let all the upright in heart exult. Here again, we see that David is in a tough spot. Many of the Psalms are lamentations and cries. In fact, we see here that David goes to the Lord and he says, hear my voice in my complaint. It's important that we know that we can go before the Lord even with our complaints. Now, this isn't like when we would tell our children, stop complaining that you're getting green beans again for food or anything like that. This is a difficult time in David's life. And David is going to the Lord and he's saying, hear my complaint, Father. And then he is explicit. He says, hear my complaint and then preserve my life from dread of the enemy. In our struggles, when we go through a hard time, sometimes we can listen to that inner what if monologue that goes through our mind. What if this? What if I lose my job? What if? And David wants to direct his attention to the Lord. And we see what happens, what if, as we go through the rest of this psalm. David does describe his complaint, and in the previous psalm he focused on the Lord. Here we see him bringing to light the plans of his enemies, that they have secret plots, that they whet their tongues like swords and have bitter words like arrows. They seek to attack and ambush in secret. There are folks arrayed against him. And that may be what you're going through right now. I don't know. But I can tell you this as someone who reads this psalm, it can be either external enemies that whet their swords, but sometimes, especially as we read the Psalms and we see enemies, we have nowhere else to look but maybe even in our own heart. And we'll get to that in just a second. But when we think of our enemies, oftentimes we need to look inside and where are we struggling with our own sin? Where our own sin would seek to undo us. And yes, we do have a solution for that. But our sin maybe seeks out this injustice, and it seeks it out in a very thorough fashion. It's interesting that the writer here, David, says this. He says, they search out injustice, and we have accomplished a diligent search, for the inward mind and heart of a man are deep. Jeremiah 17 says that the heart of a man is deceitful and wicked beyond repair. Who can know it? When we look at our own sin, sometimes our own sin, our hearts are going to be deceptive. Our sin is going to deceive us. Who can know it? Who can help us? Am I in dread and in fear of my sin or what the world might be coming after me with? Am I afraid of losing my job for doing what is right? Am I afraid of not making that sale that I need to because I want to make sure that I am upright? Am I afraid am I afraid? And David says, preserve my life from dread of the enemy. But then he points his eyes, he fixes his gaze on what God will do. And there may be two different aspects to this. God shoots his arrows at them and they are wounded subtly. They are brought to a ruin with their own tongues turned against them. All who seek them will wag their heads, and then all mankind fears. And we'll stop there just for a second to, again, what is God's final word? There will be justice. If it's something that is external, if it is something that is being placed upon us, God will make it right. If not now, in the next. But also, if it's something internal, God will also make it right. In fact, we know that because he has already made it right. We can view even this passage, even if we're struggling with our own sin, our own frustration, even if that internal monologue is just spinning around because our own sin is wrestling with us, we can go right to where God has pointed his arrow. Where has God placed his justice for us and for our sin? If we are in Christ, he's placed it on the cross. All of the wrath that you and I deserved. And there will be two things that we see. If God places his justice on the evildoer, there will be fear. There will be fear. Many ways we can think back to maybe when a sibling was getting disciplined for something that they did and the rest of the house went quiet. Why? Because we knew some serious justice was going down. In the same way, the world will look when the Lord dispenses his justice, and whether or not it's dispensed now through the local authorities or if it's dispensed later, the world will fear. They will ponder what God has done. But also, as we reflect on what God has done with our sin, we also can respond with fear, with pondering, what has God done? He has taken the sum total of my sin and he has stapled it, not just stapled it, he has nailed it to the cross. Therefore, I want to conduct myself in fear. What has God done? He has saved me. He owns me. He deserves the right use of my life. I want to conduct myself in fear of that event on the cross. Not in fear and terror, but with high respect. It was my sin that crucified Christ. God crucified Christ for me. And then in verse 10, let the righteous one rejoice in the Lord. Whether it's something external or something internal, if you have Christ, you can rejoice in the Lord. Gather with the saints and rejoice with the Lord. Tell about what God has brought about. How has he delivered you? And when you're going through the tough time, you can pray that you can have that mindset. I, in the future, will tell how God has delivered me. Let the righteous one rejoice and take refuge in him. Oh, saint, we can take refuge in the cross. Whether it's external or internal, we can rest and know that God has settled the big thing. And all the upright in heart exult. Exult, rejoice, give praise to God. Why? Because he is our refuge and our strength.